Hey, it's Danny. So I wanted to do a video about a project manager's workload because recently I've had a couple of very busy weeks and they could have easily been very stressful, but I've managed to push through with just a small amount of stress, just enough to keep me on my toes. So I want you to know or understand that if you feel like you're overwhelmed or you feel like you have too much work to do, that is completely normal for a project manager. There'll always be periods like this where it gets incredibly busy, so don't worry too much if you're feeling like this. It's completely normal. And I also feel that as project managers, it's that the stress is somewhat compounded because we carry the weight of the project's success or the responsibility of the project's success on our shoulders to a degree. We're, as project managers, responsible for the success of the project. There will always be a project exec out there or a project sponsor who's accountable for the project. But believe me, if the project is not delivering, they'll be looking to us for answers. And plus, those execs or sponsors probably get paid a lot more than we do as well to shoulder that kind of responsibility. So there's a lot to be stressed about, I get it. But even when times are hard and even when it gets really busy, we don't have to kill ourselves working ridiculous hours trying to get everything done. Okay, believe me, it doesn't matter if you don't get all your actions done. It's not going to have a big impact on the project in the long run, okay? It's really important that you understand this message because if you don't, you're in danger of making your work life very miserable or even your life very miserable. So I think we all understand that we can't get everything done, right? That's not possible. But we can certainly get some things done. So we need to make sure those some things are the right things. Now again, that might sound really obvious, but it's very easily done that we can focus our time and energy on the wrong things that don't add value to the project, especially if other people are asking us to do them or eating up our time attending other people's meetings, which is very easily done as well. Before you know it, you're in back-to-back meetings all day and you haven't had time to do any work. So what are the right things? What do we actually focus our time on? Well, I like to focus on what I call the high leverage activities. So what do I mean by a high leverage activity? I like to think of them as activities that have the highest return on investment for our time. And by doing them, they have the biggest impact on our project. And by doing them, they often cause a chain reaction of smaller activities to happen, like a domino effect. So when all is said and done, I think a project manager's responsibility is to keep that plan on track, keep it as green as possible. So if you're struggling to think about what you should be doing next or what you should be doing with your time, just take a look at your project plan and just identify where is that plan at risk of slipping. And that is where you should be spending your time. Those are the high leverage activities, and that is what we get paid to do. Keep that plan on track. So if you're struggling, just look at that plan on a page and identify where it could be at risk of slipping, and you need to do what you can to ensure that doesn't happen. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So you could be coming up to a phase of testing, right? But you found you haven't actually booked the test environment yet, or you haven't secured a data waiver for using live data in the environment. So you've got to make sure you do that and get that done. That's a high leverage activity. Or you could be in the middle of testing and it's due to finish in a couple of weeks, but you've got a defect that you just can't seem to fix. So you're at risk of having to go live with this defect. So you should be spending your time doing the stakeholder management to make sure everyone's comfortable with that defect going live and there's a workaround in place. So when you come to exiting testing, you're not going to be held up by that problem. So that is a high leverage activity. So you need to be focusing on things like that. So if you get the high leverage tasks done to keep the project on track, you can afford to let some of your other actions slip. And we don't have to be working 12 hours a day. But if you are working 12 hours a day and you're loving it and you're crushing it, then that's fine too. But for most of us, that just isn't sustainable. There comes a tipping point when the extra hours that you're putting in the project just aren't going to have a significant impact on the overall direction of the project. Okay, a good way to illustrate this is on the cost versus quality graph. So in the context of us as a project manager, the cost could be the cost of our time or our energy or our effort or even our stress. And the quality, let's just call that the greenness of our project. So initially, when we're putting in our time and our energies, we're getting great returns on our investment, we're making the project nice and green, but there comes that tipping point when the extra hours that we're putting in just don't give us that return on investment. It just isn't worth it anymore. So we just need to learn to let go of those additional hours because it just isn't worth the return. So another thing to be aware of is when we're going through these stressful times and we're overwhelmed, often that feeling of being overwhelmed is actually just an illusion. It's not real. We believe we are overwhelmed and stressed, but in reality, the situation is not so dire. It's just a feeling, an emotional state. And that often happens when it's like a very, very busy day and we're back to back all day. We're trying to multitask, getting things done. We've got 4 people, pinging us on instant messengers and they want things done yesterday, and your boss is coming up to your desk asking for something and you just kind of crack. You think, oh, I can't do this. I've just got like a million things to do. Really? You have 1 million things to do? Well, name them then. So often that's just not the case, right? The feeling of overwhelm is not actually backed up in reality by a never-ending to-do list. So if you ever feel like that, just stop, take a breath, take a pause, get some clarity and just think, right, okay, what do I actually need to do here? And just list out the actions. And often you'll find those actions are things like, call someone, send an email, do a timesheet, book in a meeting. And in themselves, they're not actually huge tasks. And in fact, if you just had a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours of uninterrupted focus, you could probably blast through them quickly. And you'd feel so much better after doing so once you've got rid of that to-do list. So I'm trying to say that feeling of overwhelm is actually just an emotional state, and you can detach yourself from that emotional state, or you can free yourself of it. If you just take a step back, take a deep breath, get some clarity and think, right, what do I actually really need to do here? So one last tip about feeling overwhelmed and how to deal with that. Try and capture all your actions that you have in one place. So for example, it could be at the back of your notebook. Just capture them all in there. So you've got them all in one place. And once they're there, you can relax somewhat, okay? Because they're not going anywhere. So it doesn't matter if the list keeps getting bigger and bigger, as long as you have a system and a habit of checking that action list on a regular basis. Could be every day, could be twice a week, could be once a week, doesn't matter. But as long as you do that, you can now kind of forget about them because they're not going anywhere, and you have a system in place to make sure that you're checking them all the time. So you don't have to hold them in your head anymore. You can basically just relax a bit and refer back to them. And when you refer back to them and you scan through your list, you'll know which ones are urgent and which ones can just wait a bit. Now I often find when I do this and I have some actions that just seem to stay there, never get done, a day later they're still there, a week later they're still there, 3 weeks later they're still there, and it turns out that those actions just don't need to be done anymore. They've kind of magically gone away, or someone else has done them. So by doing that, don't focus on the ones that are urgent and kind of leave the ones that aren't, and often they just somehow manage to go away all by themselves, which is a really useful tip. So that's it for today's video. I'll do a quick recap and then we'll call it a day. So the key message for today is, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling too stressed, don't worry too much. That's completely normal for a project manager. I know it can be difficult, but don't kill yourself working ridiculous hours trying to stay on top of everything and trying to get everything done. There comes a point when the extra hours that you're putting into the project are not going to have a significant impact in the overall direction of the project. So focus on the important stuff. Focus on those high leverage activities where you're keeping the plan on track and keeping it green. Also, that feeling of overwhelm often isn't real in the first place. It's just an emotional state you're feeling in the moment, and it can be brought about by having a particularly stressful day when everyone's coming at you at the same time for their actions and wanting to have them done yesterday. So that feeling of overwhelm can often just be an illusion in the first place. And that final tip, try and capture all your actions in the same place and set up a system and habit to review them on a regular basis, and you'll find that those urgent actions will pop out at you and you'll get those done. The other ones, you can just leave them until they're ready to be done, and often they'll just disappear anyway. You find you don't have to do them anymore. They're no longer required or important, or someone else has done them. So that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this one in the future. And until the next time, please take care.